The more things changed, the more things stayed the same in the AFC North last season. The Ravens and Steelers continued to battle for division supremacy, with Pittsburgh, as you know, winning out in the division and postseason race. Cincinnati took a step back, sitting home come playoff time, and the Browns watched the Eric Mangini era come to an end. We continue our OTAs with the AFC North. Here for some news coming out of the division, ESPN.com AFC North blogger James Walker. James, we'll start in Cincinnati. Carson Palmer obviously has made it known he doesn't want to be there. What's the latest on Palmer?
Well, from everything I'm told, Dana, Palmer is very serious about this. This is not a ploy. This is not a hoax. It has nothing to do with money. And in Carson's mind anyway, he's left Cincinnati. He's put his house in the market already, and he's not coming back. Now, I've seen this happen plenty of times before with Ocho Cinco, with Corey Dillon, Takeo Spikes, and none of them were able to leave Cincinnati on their own terms. So if Carson wins this standoff, he will be the first. But I do know that Carson knows he's 31 years old. He only has a few good years left, and it's easy to see the Bengals won't be contending for a Super Bowl anytime soon. So Carson doesn't want to be part of another rebuilding effort. So it's really going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. I do think the Bengals will do something in the draft, maybe not with the number 4 overall pick, but with a guy like maybe Ryan Mallett of Arkansas or Andy Dalton from TCU. I think one of those two guys could be on their radar at the top of the second round.
Go to Cleveland now. Mangini's out, Shermer's in, and that means what we all knew would happen. Mike Holmgren really is in charge. At least he's got his folks in place. What can we expect to see?
Well, the Browns have a lot of turnover to do, as far as completely remaking the offensive and defensive schemes. They're going to run a West Coast offense, which is what Mike Holmgren, as you said, wanted to do as the day he arrived in Cleveland. And now Holmgren has his handpicked coach in place in Pat Shermer and his handpicked quarterback in place in Colt McCoy. So this is really the time for them to start making strides. Colt McCoy will be the starter going forward next season. There's no doubt about that anymore. He will be under center in week 1. And defensively, with the Browns going to a 4-3 defense, they really lack talent at outside linebacker and defensive end. I really think that's something that they're going to have to address in the draft. And I live in Cleveland, so I know for a fact that they're one team that cannot afford a lockout. There are so many changes, so many players that have to learn a new scheme on offense and defense. So, with all the off-season workouts and practices and camps they could possibly miss, I think the Browns are one of the last teams that can afford a lockout.
Let's go to the Ravens now. They lost to the Steelers in the playoffs. We look at the pressure that's put on Joe Flacco, their quarterback now. Where does it stand?
Yeah, Dan, I mean, personally, I think it's a bit overboard. I think it's a case of too much too soon for Flacco. He went to the AFC Championship game his rookie year, and that was probably the best thing that ever happened to him and the worst thing that ever happened to him at the same time. It solidified the job for him, obviously, but at that point, he was expected to get the Ravens to the Super Bowl, and that's something he hasn't been able the last 2 years. And if Flacco does have to perform better in the playoffs, there's no disputing that. But I see him gradually improving like a lot of young quarterbacks. He put up career high in yards, touchdowns, and passer rating this season. And keep in mind, we have other young quarterbacks like Matt Ryan, like Josh Freeman in Tampa, who haven't won anything in terms of playoff games, yet they're viewed as heroes and franchise quarterbacks in their respective cities. So I really can't call. I'm not exactly sure why Flacco doesn't get the same rope as other young quarterbacks around the league, but he is being criticized a lot this offseason.
Well, as you mentioned, it's because when you get there early on, everybody wants to see more, like with the Steelers, and Ben Roethlisberger gets there in his sophomore season and then goes on and keeps winning. Let's talk about his Steelers now, though. Runners-up this season, and that often means it's tough to get even back to the Super Bowl, back to the playoffs the next season. How's Mike Tomlin and the Steelers organization addressing that?
Yeah, that's never a good thing when you're a Super Bowl runner-up. The last 10 teams that have been runner-ups did not make it back to the Super Bowl, and 7 of the last 10 did not even make it to the playoffs. And this includes the Steelers, who, when they went to the Super Bowl and won the last 2 years, they haven't made the playoffs back in 2009 and 2006. So the Steelers are fighting against a lot of negative history there, Dana. But I do think they do have the talent and the veteran leadership to at least give themselves a chance. And they have to patch a few holes this offseason. Green Bay really exposed some weaknesses there in the secondary. I think the Steelers are very thin at cornerback. Ike Taylor's going to be a free agent. They're top corner, so they're going to have to address that. And outside of Marquise Pouncey, their first-round pick at center from last year, their offensive line really needs a lot of work. And I think they have to address those two needs before they even think about getting back to the big game.
James Walker, ESPN.com AFC North blogger. James, thank you.